Welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games, where we feed our people with relatable content, and our victory condition is your satisfaction. I'm Harry, and today we have another top 10 list for you all. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my top 10 exploration board games. Now, all of these board games are games that have either an exploration theme to them or perhaps an exploration mechanism, usually in the form of hidden information. Now, many of these games have both an exploration theme and an exploration mechanism combined into one presentation. And of course, these games are going to rank very well because of that combination. So with no further ado, let's get straight to the list. My top 10 exploration board games. Let's start with number 10. My number 10 exploration board game is Jamaica. And Jamaica has a very fun pirate theme to it. And it's also a race game at the same time. So lots of little things going on in what is technically a not very light, but a medium weight family style game. In this game, players take a ship in their respective player color, and they're playing cards from turn to turn, and these cards are all played based on the dice rolling that takes place at the beginning of each round. And each of these dice, we roll 2 dice, and 1 dice will be assigned to the day action, and the second dice will be assigned to the evening action. And every card that a player has in their hand has 2 actions corresponding to the 2 times of the day, either the day action or the evening action. And based on the amount of pips that you find on the dice on the day and the night side will determine how many times you can carry out your day and evening actions when you play those cards. And again, lots of the things that you're trying to do is you're trying to gain gold, because gold those are victory points for you at the end of the game. They're going to help you most likely win the game. And also those gold can be spent at certain ports. When your ship stops at certain ports, you have to pay money or you have to pay food, and that's another currency you have to manage throughout the game. Certain spots are very expensive, and you have to spend a lot of food in order to feed your crew members, and you have to budget your resources wisely and have enough food in order to do so. Another currency you have to manage is your cannons, because you're going to be engaging in lots of conflict, lots of battle, and those cannons are tokens that you can contribute to increase your chances of rolling very powerful turns in combat and hopefully defeating your enemies so that you can capture booty from their holds and not the other way around, because if you lose the battle, then they're going to grab some booty from your holds in your ship, and that's not going to be very much to your advantage, so you got to look out for that. Now, what makes this game feel exploration-like is the fact that you have these caves, these hidden treasure caves that are kind of out of your way along the map, because the board consists of a map of Jamaica that all the ships are sailing around, and you can just try to sail around as quick as possible, because the first person to make it all the way around the island and end up in Port Royal is going to get a 15-point bonus. And according to how far you make it in the race, you're going to get a certain amount of victory points. But you can also deviate and go to these hidden treasure caves and try to find some hidden treasure, and usually they come in the form of lots of victory points. However, it's a little bit of a press your luck, because sometimes they're not victory points, and instead they're really helpful items that add or contribute to your combat or give you an additional hold for your ship. And sometimes they're very detrimental and they're harmful to you, because sometimes these are cursed cards and you are just going to have negative points. You're going to have points subtracted from your total at the end of the game. So that's something to factor in when you decide to explore those treasure caves. My number 10 exploration board game of all time, Jamaica. Now we move on to my number 9. And my number 9 is Star Trek Expeditions, designed by Reiner Knizia and published by WizKids Games. And I really strongly considered putting Star Trek Fleet Captains in this game, another Star Trek IP game from a different designer, different style of game. But I went with Star Trek Expeditions because most of this game is the exploration. There is lots of exploration going on in Star Trek Fleet Captains, because the board consists of modular tiles that are face down, and you don't know whether there's a planet there or a black hole or a star system or what have you, a nebula, and you flip them over, or you can scan to take a peek and not necessarily have to deal with their consequences or waste your time going in a direction that's irrelevant. But that's Star Trek Fleet elite captains. Don't need to talk about that. This board here consists of about 15 different spaces. This is the planet of Nibia, and there are 15 different locations on Nibia, the board, and you have all of these different mission cards that you're going to be shuffling and placing face down into each of these 15 sections. And your players, your characters, are going to be going to these different sections, and they don't know where they're going because all these cards are face down, but there's particular missions that they need to accomplish in a particular order in order to win the game. So sometimes you really wish you knew where you were going. Now, one of the characters in this game, Spock, has a special ability that once per turn, he can peek, or I think for an action, for one of his actions, he can peek at a card. However, that is still hidden information. But again, it's helpful if one of the members on your team has a little idea of which direction you may want to go to or not want to go to. Sometimes you're beaming up to the Starship Enterprise in order to heal yourself at sick bay. Also in order to fend off the Klingon ship because you're engaged in a constant battle with the Klingons throughout the entire game. But you have to beam back to the planet because that's where the bread and the butter of the game is. The different missions that you're rolling for skill tests in order to accomplish. But you do not want to waste your time going into the wrong direction. Now, sometimes, inevitably, you're going to end up going to a place that you wish you had not. But again, it's kind of like trying to figure it out, piece it out, and collectively as a group, the more players play this game, the more terrain you can cover, the more land you can cover as far as getting to all these places and getting to them in a timely fashion in order to accomplish your missions in a timely fashion, because there's definitely a time element to this game. There's a time track that ends the game, and certain missions give you additional points if you complete them at a certain point in the game. So you're always on the lookout for the watch, for the clock, and trying to keep track of time. My number 9 exploration board game of all time, Star Trek Expeditions. And now we move on to my number 8 exploration game of all time, and that is Mission Red Planet, another science fiction game. This one here designed by Bruno Cathala and Bruno Feduti. And this here is the second edition, and basically the board consists of a map of Mars, and you basically, the exploration is pretty light in this game from a mechanism perspective, but I do feel that thematically it kind of feels like that. You're exploring space, you're exploring Mars, and not only are you trying to colonize it, but you're trying to find the regions in Mars that have the best natural resources. And when you first touch down onto each of the different colonies or the different regions here in Mars or on its moon Phobos, when you first touch down, you reveal a face down token, and it tells you what natural resource that particular region or that particular colony produces, and therefore you know going forward how valuable that region is. Do you want to keep the majority, because this is an area majority game, each player has their own astronauts, and you're vying for control of these regions so that you can tap into their natural resources. And again, you're trying to figure out which of these natural resources perhaps are most valuable according to your own hidden missions, and also according to their intrinsic value as a resource and how much victory points they give you at the end of the game. Now, there is an additional element of exploration because you do have these science cards or exploration cards. I forgot what they're called right now off the top of my head, but these cards allow you to place them face down on an outer region, and it permanently affects that region, or perhaps affects it in the end game scoring at the end of the game in either a positive or a negative way. Now, the player who slid that card underneath that region is the only player who has that information, but on a future turn, another player can use one of those same type of cards in order to take a peek. So again, there is that additional exploration element to it, and of course, just the neat idea of exploring outer space, the solar system, and in particular Mars, in order to colonize it. My number 8 exploration board game of all time, Mission Red Planet. And now we move on to my number 7 exploration board game of all time, and that is Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings, the living card game in particular, designed by Nate French and published by Fantasy Flight Games. I'm a big fan of all of these LCGs from the Fantasy Flight catalog, and in particular those that are designed by Nate French. I think that Nate French has got it down packed as far as LCGs are concerned. Now, first of all, I love the universe, the Lord of the Rings universe, the Tolkien universe, and I love how the way the game I love the way that this game plays. And where does the exploration come? So on the beginning of each player's turn, they are committing a certain amount of their characters, and the characters consist of their main heroes, which are players, powerful characters that gather resources from them at the beginning of the game and have lots of cool special abilities. And then they have other allies that are less significant, weaker, and will be being picked off like flies throughout the game and dying here and there. But again, they contribute in their own way. Now, you're going to commit a certain amount of characters to your quest at the beginning of each turn, and you want to factor in how much. Now, all the characters have a specific stat which is called their willpower, and their willpower is what determines whether or not you succeed at the quest and you can make progress in your mission. And the way this works is there's always a staging area that has a couple of cards that are revealed, and they have some sort of threat stat on them. And each card has a threat stat. If all of the cards, all the character cards, your heroes and allies that you contribute to the quest, if their total willpower, the sum of all their willpower, is higher than the value of the threat level of all the cards in the staging area, then you succeed, and your success is determined by the difference. And that's how much progress you make on your current quest. However, at the beginning of each turn, after you've committed your characters to the quest, you're going to reveal from the enemy deck one card and add it to the staging area. So there's a little bit of a press your luck. So even though right before you make that reveal, you might feel confident that you have a little bit more willpower than there is threat on the staging area, after you flip that card, that might change, because that card might have a very high threat level, or perhaps it might have an instant power that makes you kill or remove one of your characters from the quest, and therefore lower your sum or your total willpower. Really, really cool. It's pretty much the exploration of the game is limited to that phase of the round or the turn when you're trying to figure out what's behind that enemy card and see what's there, and also just figure out if there's another location that you have to explore there, or if there's another enemy that perhaps is going to engage you that round and something you have to worry about. But it's really, really cool. I love the theme, and just a really exciting mechanism at the beginning of each round to go on those quests and see if you can succeed. My number 7 exploration board game of all time, The Lord of the Rings, The Living Card Game. My number 6 exploration board game of all time is Eldritch Horror, designed by Corey Konietzko and Nikki Valens and published by Fantasy Flight Games. And this game takes place within the Cthulhu mythos, the Lovecraftian world. And basically players all take on the role of investigators trying to navigate throughout the world, because the map or the board consists of a map of the entire world. So you're going from country to country, region to region, continent to continent. And you're basically fighting off monsters and trying to close portals before the Elder Ones, the big bads, break through the fabric of reality, break into our dimension and wreak havoc here. And then we're all lost and we're in trouble. So you got lots of things to factor in. You got a doom track that will basically count down when the Elder One will come crashing into your world. And you have until then in order to close all the portals and complete the mysteries on whatever mythos cards you are playing, or mystery cards, I should say, that you have based on your Elder One, the bad guy. You have one major boss that you choose for each game, and each of those bosses come with 4 different mystery cards, and you're trying to solve 3 of those mystery cards in order to do so. Now, you're doing lots of stuff throughout the game, and lots of the exploration takes place because you're going to these different locations, and each of these locations have their encounters that you're going to be having at the end of the phase. First, you have your action phase, and then you have your encounter phase. And after all heroes are done with their actions, all heroes are going to do their encounters. And you flip over a card, and you don't know what's going to happen. You have some sort of idea of what might happen based on the region you're in. For example, some locations, you know that their encounters are very likely going to help you increase a particular stat. Or perhaps you're going to try to close a gate or a portal, and you're going to have an other world encounter, and therefore that gives you an idea of what may transpire. But until you flip over that card and read its narrative text, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. Now, there's one resource in this game that's very important, and that is those clue tokens, because not only do those clue tokens help you to re-roll dice in order to successfully attempt a skill test. After you fail a skill test, you can choose to spend a clue token in order to re-roll it and hopefully change the outcome. But those clue tokens also contribute towards many of those different mystery cards that you're trying to solve in order to win the game. And quite often you have to spawn these clue tokens onto the different regions of the map, and they're all shuffled face down. You reveal one, you look at the bottom, and you see a number which corresponds to a particular location on the world map, and that is where you spawn that clue token on. So there's lots of little details here. I feel like more thematically it feels like I'm exploring, I'm trying to solve this mystery of all these different evil cultists who are trying to summon these elder ones into our reality, and I want to stop that. I mean, at the end of the day, the characters are actually called investigators, and if investigate is not a synonym for exploration or for exploring, then I don't know what is. You're exploring the world, you're globetrotting, you're fighting bad guys and monsters while you're at it, you're gaining weapons and assets and spells, you're leveling up your skills in order to fight and defeat these monsters, in order to successfully close these gates. But again, you don't know what's lurking around the corner, you do not know what's behind the other door as you end your turns in these particular locations, getting ready for an encounter. And again, you're holding your breath, hoping that the outcome is positive and that you can somehow succeed at what you're doing. Really cool, fun, immersive experience of a board game. My number 6 exploration game of all time, Eldritch Horror. And now we move on to the top 5, the cream of the crop. And my number 5 exploration board game of all time is One Deck Dungeon. And this game is exactly what the title says. This is a dungeon crawl style game, fantasy adventure game with just a deck of cards, and it's just one deck, and the deck represents all the different encounters, the monsters, the traps, the puzzles that the band of heroes have to try to encounter and solve and defeat in order to gain experience points, to gain weapons, to gain spells, to gain additional skills for their characters, to level up their characters in order so they could accommodate more items and spells and more skills and what have you. And this game is really cool because there's always going to be at most 4 face down cards which make up your dungeon. So your dungeon consists of all these cards, and on the back, as you can see, there's some doors there. So you've got 4, it's a grid of 2 by 2, 4 cards, and they're face down, and you have to decide which room you want to go to. And you're gonna flip over a card, and sometimes you're gonna wish you had not flipped over that card because perhaps there's a encounter or a monster there that you have to react to, respond to, and perhaps your stats, your skills, your weapons, and your attributes are not enough to successfully encounter this, and you would probably sustain too much casualties. So instead, you would have to run away. And when you run away, you're forced to spend time. And time is something that you're consistently spending throughout the game by discarding cards from the deck. And the quicker you go through the deck, the faster you're forced to go to the next level of the dungeon. So you want to really try to take your time as much as possible. Lots of actions are going to force you to spend time, but you don't want to rush through it because you don't want to go to the 3rd level of the dungeon or ultimately to the boss right after that if your character is not ready. You want to maintain that right balance of speed, but at the same time progression as far as your character development is concerned. You want to level them up in order for them to have more weapons, which are going to increase all of their stats, and again, more skills. Really cool, really fun game. Lots of really cool, neat, interesting characters, dungeons, and bosses to be had in this game. My number 5 exploration board game of all time, One Deck Dungeon. And now we move on to my number 4, and this is a bigger dungeon crawl here, and that is Descent, Journeys in the Dark 2nd Edition by Fantasy Flight Games. And this game here, the Descent game, first of all, the exploration comes in every quest in the form of the standard exploration that you'll find from quest to quest, where you see these different green colored search tokens, and there's a certain amount on the grid or the layout of the board according to the player count. And these search tokens are an opportunity for players to use their actions in order to flip them over and draw a card from the search deck. And quite often you're going to find items that are going to be very, very helpful to your band of heroes. Sometimes it's in the form of healing potions that will allow players to heal either their damage or their stamina, currencies and stats that they have to quite often look out for. And also, these different items can potentially give them money that carries over at the end of the quest, in between quests for the campaign phase, when players go to shop in order to buy additional equipment to strengthen and improve their characters going forward in the campaign. Now, aside from this typical exploration that you're going to see from quest to quest in the form of these search tokens, you also have many quests that include an additional layer of exploration. These additional face down tokens that you will find spread out in particular locations of the board according to the quest. And in every quest, they don't necessarily mean the same thing. They don't necessarily represent the same thing. These tokens can be very multifaceted. They're used to represent a plethora of different things within the fantastical universe of Terranoff here. And quite often what you have to do is you have to flip these face down tokens in order to see what color they are, because based on the given quest, a red token can represent one thing, and a green token can represent another, and a silver another, and a blue another. And you're looking for a particular color, or sometimes for multiples in that particular color, in order to complete your objective for that quest. And I find that to be so neat and such a creative way to repeatedly use the same board game component, these round little tokens with colors on the opposite face down side of them, to use them in so many different ways to represent so many different things in the fantasy realm of Terranoff, in order for players to aim for these things, to accomplish them, to successfully complete their quest. I find it to be very, very exciting and stimulating, and just trying to use your process of elimination and, again, teamwork in order to explore as quickly as possible, but at the same time fend off the Overlord and their minions before they cause too much damage to you and your band of heroes. My number 4 exploration game of all time, Descent: Journeys in the Dark, 2nd edition. My number 3 exploration board game of all time is Tikal, designed by Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling, and this is the original edition by Rio Grande Games. And Tikal is one of the games here on this list with perhaps the most mundane theme of them all, perhaps too realistic. This is very much a real-world theme of exploring the Mayan jungles in order to excavate temples and discover different treasures. All the games so far on this list have been either very fantasy or sci-fi type related, but this again is real-world. Players control their expedition of different explorers who are going around, again, these jungles, cutting down the trees, which is represented through a flipping of a tile at the beginning of each round, and basically uncovering this jungle to see what's underneath. And usually most spaces have some type of pathway represented by stones that the players can use to move their expedition members along the way. We have all these temples, and all these temples start at a different level, ranging from 1 through 10. And that's how many points you're going to score at the end of each scoring round whenever you have the majority in these temples. But you can increase the value of your area by using your actions to excavate. And it's really cool because this game is the innovator of the action point allowing system. Players have a certain amount of action points, and they have a pool of different actions to choose from. Each of these actions costs a different amount of action points. So you're trying to budget your turn to get the most that you can. In this game in particular, you have 10 action points at the beginning of each round, and you have about 6 or 7 different actions to pick from. And again, each of these actions have a different amount of action points that they cost. So you're trying ideally to get the best bang for your buck. Now, what makes this game so cool for this list is that it combines the two ideas of the exploration theme and the exploration mechanism, because you absolutely do feel like you're exploring the lands as you flip over those tiles and see what's going on. And also, players have some type of control because they get to place those tiles wherever they want, as long as they follow certain restrictions. They cannot place a tile where it's not adjacent to another already existing tile. It has to some way trace back to the original home base. And also, there has to be a stone pathway that connects that tile to at least one of the other tiles on the map. In other words, you cannot put a tile in a place that is inaccessible to all the players. So that part is really, really cool. Again, you have that exploration feel. You also have these hidden treasure tokens that as soon as you reveal a treasure space, you put these tokens face down. And these treasure tokens are a set collection. If you get 3 of a kind of one particular treasure, you'll get more points than if you only get 2 or 1. But it's cool because, again, they're face down and you're obviously aiming for particular treasures according to the ones that you already have in your possession. So when you're able to flip them over and get the ones that you thought you had, you're very, very excited about it. My number 3 exploration board game of all time, Tikal. And now we move on to my number 2. And my number 2 is Legendary Encounters. And this game here is basically, it's from the Legendary system from Upper Deck Entertainment. And this spin-off here, if you will, is based in the Aliens universe, the Aliens franchise of horror sci-fi films where a bunch of Marines or heroes are fighting these aliens that kind of resemble insects and gruesome, ugly little creatures, except they're gigantic and bigger than the human beings. This is a very cool game because, first of all, it's very true to the intellectual property, and you do feel kind of like you're living or experiencing one of the Aliens movies. All these scenarios in this game represent one of the 4 original or earliest Aliens movies, and you go through the different objectives based on what actually happens in those stories. But why I put this game on this list, it does not have an exploration theme to it. Not really. It's really sci-fi horror, as I mentioned earlier. But what makes this so cool is that the cards, the enemy cards, they come into the game, into this section of your board or your playmat here, that's referred to as the complex, and they come in face down. And one of the actions that you're taking quite often during the game is you're using your attack currency from the cards. This is a deck building game. The cards in your hand. You're using your attack currency to scan the face down, the rooms in this complex, so you could flip up the face down cards and see what are there. And quite often it's a gruesome, scary looking, very dangerous bad guy, an alien there. But sometimes it's other things. It could be a kitty cat that might help you lick your wounds, literally. It might be a hazard that will mean bad news for you. It might be an event that again can mean very, very bad news for you, or it can be a card that contributes towards the objective that you're currently trying to complete. So again, it's a little bit of a push your luck and trying to figure things out. There's a little bit of a memory element because sometimes the cards are forced to flip back face down, but for the most part, when you reveal a card, it stays revealed. And it's just so cool because, again, that hidden element, when you first reveal that card, there's so much emotions there. Sometimes you are legitimately scared when you see that it's a monster that there's no way you can defeat on your current turn because you don't have enough power, and soon they're going to end up in the combat zone, and all the players are going to have to suffer the consequences because of that. Or sometimes you reveal a card that's an egg that might lead to a face hugger, which might eventually lead to a chest burster, and you're being eliminated from the game. Or sometimes there's a sigh of relief. You flip over a card, and it's of an event that perhaps wasn't too good to you, but you could survive. Or perhaps it's a card that contributes towards your objective, and you're very, very excited and ecstatic about it as you see and reveal that card. Really cool. It definitely heightens that exploration feel from a mechanical perspective. My number 2 exploration board game of all time, Legendary Encounters. And finally, we move on to my number 1. My number 1 exploration board game of all time is Robinson Crusoe, designed by Ignacy Trzewiczek and published by Portal Games. This is a cooperative game where players, or a player, or a group of players, take on the role of castaways in the Cursed Island. And this is a scenario-based game. The base game here comes with 7 different scenarios, and all the scenarios revolve around 2 things: the island itself and survival. There's some element of survival. Now, yes, the end game condition or objective that you're trying to accomplish varies from scenario to scenario, but those are 2 underlying themes that you'll find throughout all scenarios. You're trying to have food to feed your people at the end of each night phase. You're trying to have a place to live in successfully to prevent or avoid the effects of the elements, because there's a weather phase at the end of each round where you have to roll dice, and you might succumb casualties based on rain, snow, sleet, or whatever it is. There's no sleet in this game, it's just rain or snow. But sometimes you might roll a wild beast that's gonna ravage your base or your campsite if you don't have walls or a palisade that will help you protect it. This game is really, really cool because not only does it have that exploration theme as you're exploring the island, literally uncovering it tile by tile as you take the exploration actions, but it also has an exploration mechanical feel to it as you reveal these event cards at the beginning of each turn, as you draw these specific cards when you take certain actions, particular actions like the building action or the explore action or the hunt action. Not the hunt action, actually, the gather food action. When you choose these actions, you sometimes roll dice depending on the amount of workers you contribute to these actions. This is a worker placement game. And you could either guarantee your success in certain actions by placing 2 workers in that location, or you can just place 1 worker, try to do a little bit more that turn, but at the same time risk it by rolling dice that determine whether or not you're successful. And those dice will also determine whether or not you flip over event cards from those particular action decks. And again, you're kind of just figuring out what's going on in this island, what dangers lie there. When you choose to go hunt, you flip over a face down animal card and you have no idea what animal it is. You're hoping that it's an animal that is weaker than your current weapon stat, right? Your current weapon level, because if you fight an animal that has a higher strength than your current weapon value, then you're going to sustain damage to your character according to the difference in the 2 values. Really, really cool. Lots of exploration opportunities in this game. Really fun from a thematic, immersive experience. My #1 exploration board game of all time, Robinson Crusoe. And that's it, folks, for today's list. My top 10 exploration board games of all time. Comment down below. Tell me what you think about these games. Tell me what's your favorite exploration board game of all time. Tell me where I cheated and I deserve to be scolded for putting one of these games or multiple of these games on this list. I'm interested in hearing and reading what you guys have to say. That's it for today, guys. This is Harry saying take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming.